If you spend enough time in the Atchafalaya Basin, you'll hear stories that never made it into the history books. Stories whispered around campfires. Stories told in bait shops after sunset. Stories old fishermen refuse to talk about after midnight. This is one of those stories. Today, I titled this story, The Ghost Ship of Jean Lafitte. The old Cajuns say that the spirit of Jean Lafitte never truly left Louisiana. According to legend, when the famous pirate vanished from history, he carried with him a fortune in stolen gold, silver, and jewels. Some believed he buried it along the Gulf Coast. Others claim he had hid it somewhere deep within the endless waterways of the Atchafalaya Basin. But there's another story, a dark story. If you like hearing stories about the swamplands, please subscribe and press that bell so you'll be notified about my next story. Let me know in the comments if you ever experienced something weird or that you couldn't explain. I'd love to hear about it. Now back to the story. So there's another story, a dark story, a story that is only talked about in whispers and then only during the daylight hours. Story says that Lafitte died angry that he died and left behind his fortune, angry that he was never allowed to spend any of it, angry that his empire had crumbled around him, still angry that time had passed him by, and because of that anger, his spirit could never rest. I first heard the tale from an old trapper who went by the name of Emil. He was nearly 80 years old, and he had been living in the basin his entire life. One evening, while we sat beneath the porch of his cabin, he pointed toward the black waters stretching into the darkness. "You ever heard the bells?" he asked. "What bells?" His face turned serious. "The bells from Jean Lafitte's ship." I laughed. I never heard of them. Emil didn't laugh. His face grew grim. "The night you hear them bells," he said quietly, "you best go the other way. Fast." Then he told me the story. According to legend, he said, on certain nights, when the thick fog rolls across the swamp, a ship appears where no ship should be. Not a fishing boat, not a tugboat, but a full-sized sailing vessel. Its black sails hang motionless despite the wind. Its lanterns glow with an eerie yellow light, and its deck is crowded with shadowy figures who never speak. The vessel glides silently through the bayous, far too narrow for a ship of its size. The water beneath it never ripples. The cypress trees seem to bend away from it, and there, at the helm, is a tall figure wearing a dark coat and a broad-brimmed hat. That's right, Jean Lafitte himself. Most people think it's just an old folks' tale. I did too. Until the night I saw the ship. It happened around the fall of 2007. I was running some bush lines a few miles from my cabin. The afternoon had been clear. The sun shone bright. There wasn't a cloud around. But just before sunset, a thick fog began to slide in from the cypress trees, floating over the water like some sort of apparition. In no time at all, I could see nothing. Not even the front of the boat. The swamp disappeared around me. The beam from my spotlight was useless. You could see nothing through that thick fog. I thought about heading back home, but I figured it'd probably be safer just to wait it out. Maybe the fog would pass as fast as it had come. That thought about cost me my sanity. Around midnight, I heard something. A bell. Faint at first. Ding, it went. Then, ding, ding. Sound drifted through the fog, slow, rhythmic, almost mournful. Then, thought about Emil's warning. My stomach tightened. Then I heard a different sound. Wood creaking. Not the sound a tree would make while bending in the wind. No, this was different. This was like the sound of a large wooden ship as it swayed to the waves. I turned off my motor to hear better. The noise grew louder, closer. I began to make out a glow through the fog. Then a dull yellow light appeared. My heart started beating hard in my chest. At first, I thought it must be a tugboat, but I didn't hear no motors. Then I began to make out the outline. I could see the towering masts. I could see black sails, rigging stretching into the mist. It was a full-size sailing ship, but it couldn't be, I thought. I was too deep in the basin. The bayous were far too small for anything of that size. Then the ship emerged completely from the fog. It was enormous. Yet it moved, or a better word might be, seemed to glide effortlessly, silently, as though the swamp itself parted to let it pass. Lanterns lined the rails. Their yellow flames flickered. Figures stood motionless along the deck, dozens of them, maybe more. None of them spoke. They simply stared, watching, waiting. Then I saw the man at the helm. He wore a long coat, one hand resting on the ship's wheel, the other gripped a curved sword. Though we were yards apart, through the fog, I could feel his eyes fixed on me. A cold sensation crawled down my spine. The figure slowly raised its arm and pointed, either at me or the bank beside me. I couldn't tell. Then he smiled. The smile was not friendly. It was not welcoming. It was the smile of a man that had spent centuries trapped between worlds. It was a smile filled with bitterness, hatred, and hunger. The bell rang again. Ding, ding, ding. Suddenly, every lantern on the ship flared brighter. The men lining the dark stepped forward at the same moment, not walking, more like gliding, as if hanging from invisible strings. The air around me suddenly turned cold. I cranked my motor and slammed it into gear. My boat jumped forward. Behind me, the bells continued ringing, faster now, louder. I refused to look back. Branches raked my face as I sped through the darkness. The fog seemed to come alive, closing around me like it was trying to turn me around. Then suddenly, I heard the sounds of insects again. I looked behind me, nothing there. No fog, no ship, no bells. The next morning, I returned to the same area. I found something by the edge of the bank next to the shoreline. It was a tarnished silver coin. One side was the image of a ship. On the other was an image I did not recognize. I took the coin to Emil. The old trapper looked at it for a long time. Never touched it. He said, "Take it back." "Throw it away," he said. "Why?" I asked. His expression darkened, because every man that kept one ended up hearing those bells again. I didn't listen. I kept the coin. It had to be worth thousands, maybe even millions. 3 weeks later, I heard the bells again. One single bell. Ding! Sound came from somewhere out on the water. I did not want to relive that event a second time. I stepped to the bank near the edge, and I threw the coin as far as I could into the waters. For a second, it seemed to hover on the surface. Then slowly, it sank into the black, murky depths of the bayou. But it was too late. Since then, I've heard them bells several times more. Always when the fog covers the swamp. Sometimes I wake in the early morning dawn and see wet footprints on my porch. Footprints that stop at my front door. Almost as though someone stood there for a while, listening, waiting, hoping. I've been by that area many times since then. I never found another coin. But every time the fog rolls into the Atchafalaya swamp, I lock my doors and windows early. 'Cause the old Cajuns say that John Lafitte is still searching for something he lost long ago. Whether it's for his treasure, his soul, or perhaps new crewmen for his ghostly ship. Only thing I know is, if you ever hear them bells through the fog, leave immediately. For your sake, do not pick up any coins you may find at the water's edge. I have heard that old fishermen still repeat, seeing black sails through foggy mist. They still hear the bells in the Atchafalaya Basin. Whenever they do, the same warning is passed on from one generation to the next. If you see Jean Lafitte's ship, pray it doesn't see you first. Thanks again for staying here with me for this next story. I hope to see you again when I load my next one. Until then, God bless.